This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Libya's parliament votes to reject two security and maritime deals signed with Turkey. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang to begin six-day official visit to Africa next Tuesday. And President Museveni starts six-day walk to commemorate Uganda's liberation struggle. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme, Kenyan government to start aerial spraying in 3 counties hit by Locust invasion. And in sport, Ghana head coach Kwesi Appiah sacked in sweeping football changes. We begin with the conflict in Libya. The country's internationally recognized Eastern-based parliament has voted to reject 2 security and maritime deals signed between Turkey and the Government of National Accord, or the GNA. The Libyan constitution dictates that deals signed with foreign countries must first be approved by parliament, but the country is currently split between 2 rival administrations. The UN-backed and internationally recognized GNA is based in the capital, Tripoli, while the Tobruk government is based in the east and is allied with the self-styled Libyan National Army. In an emergency session on Saturday, the Eastern Parliament also voted to cut ties with Turkey after what it called a breach of sovereignty. Well, earlier this week, Turkish Parliament approved a decision by Ankara to send troops to support the GNA in Libya. Meanwhile, the Libyan National Army commander Khalifa Haftar says the war is being fueled in his country by Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Haftar has labelled Turkey's leader as a deranged Turkish sultan. Speaking in Benghazi, the commander has confirmed that his forces are accepting the challenge of Turkish military intervention in Libya. He's also called on all Libyans to take up arms in response.
It has been discovered that there are traitors among us who are signing deals with Turkey of deposition, humiliation and shame without any populist, constitutional or moral grounds towards the submission of our land and skies. But today, we announce that we are facing and accepting the challenge, that we are lining up, rejecting the differences among us and announcing jihad.
Well, for more on this, we are now joined by our CGTN colleagues Mikhail Bar-David in Istanbul, Turkey, and Yasser Hakim in Cairo in Egypt. Let's start with you, Yasser. What does the vote in the Libyan parliament mean for Turkey's involvement in the country's civil war?
I think what Parliament is trying to send is a message that the Turkish involvement is illegal. You understand that Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has announced that he is sending the troops according to a request from the Prime Minister of the GNA, or the Government of National Unity in Libya. So he's saying he's doing this because he has been requested so by the head of Libya. What the parliament is saying is that it rejects this agreement and that this deal is not legal because for the GNA to take such a step, or for Fayez Sarraj to take such a step, he has to go back to parliament to take an approval, because this is a decision that relates to the sovereignty of the country, so parliament has to approve it. And the internationally recognized parliament, which is in the east, does not approve, and that's the vote, that it does not approve such a decision, and that they're also taking Fayez Sarraj to court for treachery, and as well as informing the Security Council that they do not recognize Fayez Sarraj as the head of the GNA. So what is happening is trying to take out any legality or legitimacy to the Turkish involvement in Libya, and also to the maritime and security deals signed by the GNA with the Turkish government.
Okay, thank you for that. Over to you now, Mikhail. Has the Turkish government reacted to these latest developments? And if not, what's likely to happen next?
Well, Karen, we do not have a reaction from Turkey yet. However, if they do give a response, we expect that it would likely be that these statements, these decisions made by the Libyan National Army and by Haftar's forces, the parliament, anything from the LNA is basically for Turkey irrelevant at this point right now, as Turkey believes that the GNA, the Government of National Accord, is the sole legitimate power in Libya, and that's why they really don't really care at this point what the other side says, and they're not going to take action in accordance to what they say. So if they do give a response, we'll probably wait for something in those lines. But what happens next really depends on Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan. The motion that was passed by the Turkish parliament gives him full power regarding the decision-making process of the deployment of Turkish troops in Libya, regarding the extent, the scope, and the timing of these deployments. Potential deployment will all depend on him. So it's really a matter of strategy by the Turkish Defense Ministry and by Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan. So that's what we're expecting. We're expecting any details to come out from the Turkish officials regarding what is next.
Okay, and back to you, Yasser. Can the Government of National Accord allow Turkish troops into the country despite Parliament's vote rejecting the decision?
Now, I think if you talk theoretically, it's one thing. Of course, it shouldn't. But if you talk on the ground and politics, especially in the Middle East, this is a totally different story. We've seen this kind of the involvement and developments in countries like Syria, Iraq, Yemen, where you've seen foreign forces intervening in these countries, also with the aid of local forces or local powers. And I don't think, and I second what Michelle just said, I don't think it will deter Fayez Sarraj from allowing the Turkish troops inside Libya, or it will not also deter Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan from continuing on his plan to send troops to Libya. It's just a legal way or some kind of a message the parliament is sending to the international community that it is rejecting this move by Fayez Sarraj. But on the ground, I don't think it will make any changes, and it will stop any escalation in the next few weeks.
Okay, thanks for that. And finally, to you, Mikhail. Many countries and institutions have strongly condemned the deployment of Turkish troops in Libya. Has there been any change in Turkey's position on the deployment of troops? Are they likely to be influenced, do you think, by the international community?
I don't believe so, Karen. This government, the ruling Justice and Development Party known as AK Party, does not really seem to respond well to criticism and condemnation. Once they are determined, they follow their course, especially with their leader, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan. Once he is determined, he moves forward with those decisions. And we had a similar scenario just a few months ago in October, when Turkey also carried out a cross-border operation into northern Syria against the YPG, which Turkey considers to be a terrorist organization. There was a lot of international criticism there. There was a potential threat of sanctions from the United States as well, but Turkey remained determined and moved forward in that process as well. So we don't expect anything to change here in the process for Libya, for Turkey. And right now, Libya is very critical for Turkey. Turkey feels kind of excluded from the Mediterranean at this point. Right now, Greece, Israel, and Egypt has also signed a agreement for the East Med pipeline program. So that really kind of excludes Turkey with their rival countries. So it's very important right now for Turkey that the maritime boundary agreement that Ankara signed with the GNA still remains in force. So for that to happen, of course, the GNA needs to remain in power, and that's what really Turkey wants at this point.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That was Mikhail Bar-David in Istanbul in Turkey for us. And earlier, of course, we spoke to Yasser Hakim in Cairo in Egypt. Moving on to other news, Chinese State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi will begin a 6-day official visit to 5 African countries next Tuesday. This continues a tradition of Chinese foreign ministers travelling to the continent for their first overseas trip of a new year since 1991. Yi will visit Djibouti, Eritrea, Burundi and Zimbabwe, and his first stop will be Egypt. Yasser Hakim takes a look at what's expected during his visit to Cairo.
China and Egypt have forged a strong relationship recently. This is evident with the numerous meetings between Chinese President Xi Jinping and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in the last 4 years.
The relationship between them has reached the level of strategic partnership. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi visited China 6 times. This is a large number of visits to a foreign country. There are always efforts to develop and improve bilateral ties in all domains.
Multiple issues are to be on the agenda of talks for China's Foreign Minister Mr. Wang Yi and his Egyptian counterparts. Most notably, the developments in Libya are a main concern for Egypt.
China's stance is clear. There must be a national dialogue and a call for all factions to sit at the negotiating table. China has thousands of employees in Libya with the Libyan oil company. So like Egypt, China is working towards retaining peace and stability in Libya through dialogue, not violence.
Talks are also expected to focus on coordinating policies over other issues in the region.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry has stressed on cooperation with Egypt to fight terrorism. President Xi Jinping has focused on fighting the 3 evils: terrorism, extremism and separatism. Both countries are working together on this strategy.
Strengthening economic cooperation is also on the table. Chinese investments in Egypt have doubled to $10 billion in 2019, while bilateral trade has exceeded $15 billion.
China has huge investments in the new capital and the industrial zone. There are also many Chinese projects in transportation, energy, renewable energy and more. Meanwhile, Egypt wants to learn from the Chinese experience in development and industrialization.
Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
In Uganda, President Yoweri Museveni has started a 6-day historic walk to commemorate the liberation struggle that his National Resistance Army fought before taking power in 1986. Over 1,000 people, mostly veterans and some members of the ruling National Resistance Movement Party, joined the trek, which will cover 7 districts. CGTN's Isabel Nakiria reports.
President Museveni and his former combatants will retrace the routes that they took during this struggle. The 200-kilometer trek will comb the Luwero Triangle, which was the epicenter of the war that brought Mr. Museveni to power over 30 years ago. The Ugandan president is expected to interact with ordinary people who help support his fighters along the way and find ways of improving their incomes.
I still remember all the people who supported us during the struggle. There are people who gave us forests to camp in. I remember all of them, like Sonko, Chirabira, Segirinya.
The group will camp at fighting bases where the former fighters used as tactical units before embarking on their journey.
Here is where we fought. We moved with our luggage and were meeting people running away from the war and warning us not to go ahead.
The Ugandan leader will also condole with families who lost their loved ones during the 5-year-old war. This is the second trek that Mr. Museveni is leading. The first took place over 20 years ago. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
We are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including Kenya's government to start aerial spraying in 3 counties hit by locust invasion. And thousands gather in 3 Iraqi cities to mourn 2 commanders killed on Friday.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
To Kenya now, where the government is scheduled to begin an aerial spraying exercise in 3 northern counties in a bid to get rid of locusts. The government has acquired 3,000 litres of chemicals for the exercise, scheduled to begin on Saturday night. But as CGTN's Wilkisa Nyabwa reports, locals have devised their own methods of battling the invading insects. Let's now take a look.
These are unconventional methods of battling a locust invasion, but desperate times have forced these villagers to take desperate measures. Residents have resorted to shouting, honking, banging tin cans, and even enlisting police reservists to fire in the air and lob tear gas canisters at the locusts. But the swarm continues to advance, a swirling mass which blocks out the sun as it inches further into Wajir County in Kenya's north. Swarms of desert locusts have invaded the country's northern region. Marsabit, Wajir and Mandera are the most affected counties. Government officials believe the locusts crossed into the country from Somalia and Ethiopia.
As government, we have been monitoring closely the situation. However, these insects crossed the border from Elwak on 28th December 2019 and have since moved some parts of this country, and essentially parts that are in northern regions of this country.
With the insects threatening to invade more regions, the government has now deployed an aircraft to begin an aerial spraying exercise in the 3 affected counties. Ground teams in Wajir, Marsabit and Isiolo counties are also being equipped with sprayers and protective gear to tackle the locusts.
And if we contain them in the neighboring counties to Somalia and Ethiopia, the 3 counties, they will not be able to spread to the other counties.
The north is home to nomadic communities which depend on pastoralism.
If this insect is not controlled, then very soon we are going to talk about drought again because of the impact of the locusts.
In the affected regions, residents continue to battle the locusts in their own way, but after the spraying begins, they hope the insects that have plagued them will be banished from the area. Wilkisa Nyabwa, CGTN.
Hundreds of thousands of people gathered in 3 Iraqi cities to mourn 2 commanders and others killed in a US airstrike on Friday. Iraqi Prime Minister Adel Abdul Mahdi was among those who marched in the capital Baghdad. Iran's Major General Qasem Soleimani and the Deputy Commander of Iraq's Popular Mobilization Forces, Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, along with other military leaders, were killed on Friday. The Pentagon says President Donald Trump ordered the airstrike near to Baghdad's international airport. The US claims the killing was to deter plans for unspecified Iranian attacks on American targets. Iran has vowed harsh retaliation for Soleimani's death. Earlier, we talked to our correspondent, Laith Al-Haida, in Baghdad.
Today, lots of delegations also willing to leave Baghdad. This is also some news that heard from some medias around, local medias in Baghdad, saying that lots of delegations trying to move to Erbil instead of being in Baghdad because the situation is really unpredictable, and they are willing to find another peaceful or safe, a more safe place for them. Lots of people, when we saw in Kalumia, when the march of the ceremony have started, lots of people were so angry, and even in the protesting yard in Tahrir Square, they were having the same opinion. They are against this attack, and they have a statement about it saying that the Iraqi sovereignty has been broken, and we need a homeland with sovereignty, not without. So it seems like everybody in Iraq have one opinion about it, like what's happened by the US forces is unacceptable.
Meanwhile, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani has visited the house of Qasem Soleimani to pay his respects to his family. Rouhani said the US had made a big mistake, which they would feel in the years to come.
The crime that the United States committed will not be forgotten in the history of US crimes. It is similar to the 1953 coup. It is like the downing of the passenger Airbus in the Persian Gulf. These are crimes by the United States that will never be forgotten in Iran's history.
Mr. Rouhani, when the blood of my father's friends was shed, my father would avenge them. Now who will avenge my father's blood?
Everyone will take revenge for the martyr's blood. Don't worry about that.
All of the sports news coming up for you after the break, including Ghana head coach Kwesi Appiah sacked in sweeping football changes.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We start in Ghana, where Black Stars coach Kwesi Appiah has been sacked, while the technical benches of all national teams, both male and female, have been dissolved in sweeping changes. The Ghana Football Association's contract with Appiah ended at the end of December. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai has more from Accra.
Kwesi Appiah was relieved of his duty as Black Stars head coach after the Ghana FA dissolved all technical crew of the national teams. Appiah had a poor Africa Cup of Nations campaign last year in Egypt, where the Black Stars got knocked out at the last 16 stage. The poor performance from the Black Stars has largely been blamed on Kwesi Appiah, whom critics accuse of failing to create a formidable team since taking over the team 2 years ago.
For Ghana's bearing on the AFCON 2019, it's something that Ghana really wants. Ghana wants an African Cup of Nations trophy because we've not won it in a very, very long time. And so for him to put up a performance at AFCON that is the worst since 2008 is something that did not help him.
Kwesi Appiah needed to have resigned after the AFCON and basically failing in all the two targets that were set for him by the SWAL Association. That's to try and qualify for the World Cup in 2018 and win AFCON 2019. The AFCON ending in one of the most disastrous campaigns we have in recent times.
Ghana has been on an elusive search for a fifth AFCON trophy since annexing the fourth one in 1982. With Kwesi Appiah now shown the exit, discussions on whether Ghana should turn to a foreign coach or not has reignited.
The onus will lie on the FA to look whether they want to take a local coach or a foreign coach. I'm thinking that, they'll start looking at foreign coaches. But have foreign coaches helped us in the past? Let's also look at that as well. But I feel that if we put too much bearing on taking a local coach, it might hurt us at this point.
We have to go for a competent coach. If a foreign coach or expatriate applies and have a very quality CV than a local coach, he should be given the job. If a local coach convinces and have a very solid track record and CV over a foreign coach, he needs to be given the job.
Meanwhile, the Ghana Football Association has appointed ex-Ghana captain C.K. Akono as interim Black Stars coach until a substantive one is appointed. Akono will start the process of preparing the team for the 2022 FIFA World Cup qualifiers, which begin in March. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Tottenham Hotspur will be looking to book their spot in the fourth round of the FA Cup when they travel to Middlesbrough on Sunday afternoon. Jose Mourinho's side will be the favourite to progress, even though Middlesbrough come into the third round clash off the back of 4 straight championship victories. Jonathan Woodgate confirmed that new signings Roberts and Nmecha could both be involved at the Riverside. As for Tottenham, they'll be missing the services of their talisman, Harry Kane, who suffered a hamstring injury in his last English Premier League outing against Southampton.
I don't want to be here with you crying every press conference now. Everybody knows who he is, what he means for the team, what he means for the fans, for the club, his quality, the routines that the team has, playing with him. Every minute of every game that he doesn't play, we miss him. So the matches that he's not going to play with us, we are going to miss him. But I don't want to be crying here all the time. I want to focus now on the players that are available.
Over to the Italian Serie A, where Zlatan Ibrahimovic has held his first press conference following his move to AC Milan. Ibrahimovic has rejoined the club after 7 years for a 6-month period with an option to extend. The 38-year-old says he's getting more offers now than 10 years ago when he was in his prime.
After the last match in the United States with the Los Angeles Galaxy, I got a call from Paolo Maldini. We talked a bit about our ideas. He asked me how I was, normal things. At 38, I have received more offers than at 28.
In tennis, Bulgaria came from 1-0 down to get a thrilling 2-1 victory on the opening day of the ATP Cup against Britain. Grigor Dimitrov helped Bulgaria claw back to 1-1 with a 2-6, 6-4 and 6-1 victory over Dan Evans after Cameron Norrie had defeated Dimitar Kuzmanov 6-2, 3-6 and 6-2. Dimitrov then teamed up with world number 477, Alexander Lazarov. The pair saved 2 match points before upsetting Jamie Murray and Joe Salisbury, 7-6, 6-7 and 11-9 in the deciding doubles clash. Bulgaria is set to face Moldova in their next tie on Sunday. Elsewhere, Daniil Medvedev and Karen Khachanov saw Russia begin their ATP Cup campaign with victory over Italy in Perth. Medvedev overcame an early scare to beat Fabio Fognini 1-6, 6-1 and 6-3. This added to Khachanov's earlier 7-5, 6-3 victory over Stefano Travaglia. Italy will next face Norway as Russia take on the US in their Sunday fixtures. The $15 million ATP Cup, which features 24 nations competing in Perth, Brisbane and Sydney over 10 days, serves as a solid platform for the world's top players to prepare for this month's first Grand Slam of the year, the Australian Open. Well, that's it for this edition of Africa Live. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. Thank you for watching and see you again soon. Bye for now.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
When we talk about artists, celebrities and philanthropists giving back through charity work, what often comes to mind are those from the West and their different charities. In the last 2 decades, however, African personalities have become more involved in giving back through charity work in their respective communities and also across the continent. So why are African celebrities now choosing to take a greater role in giving back? And what does this say about the state of social structures across Africa today? I'm Beatrice Marshall. Welcome to Talk Africa. There are currently thousands of charitable organizations operating in Africa. Now, this is in addition to African individuals who donate millions of dollars each year to various causes. Let's take a look at some of these charities and the role they play in African society today.
Across Africa today, both local and international charities are involved in different kinds of community service. These range from small local children's homes and schools to foundations set up by wealthy individuals who give millions of dollars each year to various causes. Over time, there have been different views about the work charities are doing in Africa, and in some cases, their legitimacy has been called into question. There has also been debate about how beneficial foreign charities operating in Africa are to local communities. Over the last few years, though, there has been an increase in the number of charities and foundations in Africa started and run by locals. Genuine charitable organizations, though, fill a need in society that's currently not being met. They play an important role within marginalized communities in Africa, providing education, shelter, and food to people who would otherwise be going without.
And joining me now to unpack charity work in Africa are in Lagos, Seyi Shey. She's a singer, songwriter and actress. In studio with me, we have Kenyan hip-hop artist Frasha from the Group P unit and Parcelelo Kantai, writer and investigative journalist. To you all, welcome to Talk Africa. Let me start by setting the stage here because over time there's been large amounts of charity, donations and philanthropy pouring into Africa. But what is less known are the contributions that are being given by successful African personalities. Shey, let me start off with you because the world knows you as a singer, songwriter and actress, but less is known about what you do outside your music work, specifically your organization, if I can mention, A Ray of Hope. So briefly, just tell us about this.
A Ray of Hope is started off as an initiative, really to bring a glimmer of hope to displaced children, displaced women, and displaced families. And initially we started off by literally partnering with some of our organizations here in Nigeria, food organizations, drink organizations, and companies and organizations that were willing to donate money. And we would basically go about partnering with them and use those resources that they donated to basically help the children or the women or the families. And it started off with an orphanage who I am now the matron of in a place called Ibadan here in Nigeria. And then we moved to several orphanages around Nigeria and motherless babies' homes. And then we got these organizations to simply pledge to supply the orphanage or the motherless babies' home or the families, pledge to provide certain resources for them for a year, 2 years.
All right, Fresha, let me bring you in here because you also run the Fresha Foundation that deals a lot with orphanages. Tell us a bit about your work.
My foundation was formed 3 years ago, and 2 years ago we were dealing with children's homes, people with disabilities, And then this year we actually moved into HIV and AIDS, because what we found out is some of the children's homes that we were dealing with had HIV positive kids, and they had problems with nutrition. So we tried and do sustainable projects in the children's home for them to be able to grow and sell some of their foods that they were getting. So it's taken around 3 years.
So clearly working with underprivileged children and working with underprivileged people is a priority for you, as is for Shishe. What motivated you?
Yeah, I think mostly it's my upbringing. My dad and my mom have always shown me that whatever you get, you're supposed to share it. And there's no impact that is more impactful in the world if you can't help somebody else. So whatever small I got from my music, I was able to share it. And it's something that I enjoy doing, and it's something that I also want to show my kids, you know, this is how you do, this is how people live. If you're able to bring somebody up from the low sides, you know, if you're able, it's good.
Shay, though, what motivated you? Give us a bit of a background as to why exactly you decided to pick on the charity that you picked on. What motivated you to get into charity work?
I've been raised to know that, you know, every little that you have, you know, you should try and bless people with it, or the less fortunate. And I think that I just came to realize that I had some influence in the world and in my industry. And I could use that influence as a platform to do something for people that are less fortunate than me. And I decided to specifically take up orphanages or children without mothers or fathers, because I know how it feels to not have a father, for example, in my life growing up. And I know how it, and I know what it is to not have a family unit. I've seen it, and I've been a part of it, and I've been around it. And I think that there are more displaced children and more motherless and fatherless children in Nigeria, in Africa, in the world than there needs to be. So I was just inspired by that, and I decided to do something about it.
To you both, Shay and Frasha, though, Shay, you're talking about you have influence in the world, and as a result, you want to use that influence to do good in your community. Frasha, you know, skeptics might argue, though, that being influential people in your various industries, this is just a publicity stunt. How would you respond to that?
I think also my background is, for those people who don't know me, I'm a medic by profession. And when I used to work in Aga Khan for 6 years. And when I used to